Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Matt, and this is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit, your beacon of freedom and the American way of life. Tune in every Friday for a new episode as we dive into the world of liberty and what makes our country great. Welcome back to LLP, everybody. This is Eric and Matt, and I hope everybody's having a great week. Man, we are going to be diving into an awesome subject here today on the podcast. We're going to be talking about the changing face of the prepper community. This could really sort of go into the gun world as well, and we are going to dive into that subject a good bit here in today's podcast. How's things going this week?
Tiring. You know, you and I, we always try to get in here and try to get an episode or two knocked out, and we've just been, with Range Day coming up on your end. We have the new business, the Jiu-Jitsu Academy going up on my end. I mean, we've just been running around like chickens with our heads cut off, man. It's tough to get in here.
Well, that's quite the mental picture there, but I certainly understand where you're coming from, and things been busy on our end as well. But I'm looking forward to getting back into doing more podcasts, and we are trying to get as many podcasts in the hat for you guys as possible. So I appreciate your patience. And without further ado, we will go ahead and get into today's podcast. But before we get started, I would like to thank today's sponsor, and that is going to be our friends at mypatriotsupply.com. If you go to their website, mypatriotsupply.com/LLP, I'll put a link down in the description box below. You'll get 20% off either a month's supply or a 3-month supply. So it's a great way to check out their, food items that they sell. A great way to get some preps in the kitchen, some preps over in your pantry. Check them out. Really great freeze-dried options that will last a long time, a really long shelf life. And we thought we'd mention them in today's podcast. And a big thanks to them for supporting our efforts. And also, it really does translate directly to some of the stuff we're going to be talking about here today.
It really does. And just a quick note with that, a personal experience I had. The food tastes absolutely amazing, and we were cooking dinner one night, and I thought I had some mashed potatoes in the pantry, and we didn't. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to run downstairs in the basement, and I'm going to crack open my prep. I took a bag of mashed potatoes out, and I used it for our regular dinner, and everybody said that those were the best mashed potatoes they've ever had. And I thought the same thing, and come to find out, when they cook the mashed potatoes before they dehydrate it, they cook it in chicken broth, not water.
Wow.
So they literally were like the tastiest mashed potatoes I've ever had. It blew me away.
Awesome.
And this has nothing to do with like, hey, they're paying. But dude, the food just tastes good.
Yeah, I remember the episode we did where we tasted all the different entrees.
Dude,
and
they're on
I thought
point.
It was fantastic.
It was on point.
Yeah, check out their website. Go to our link down in the description box below. And if you want to get yourself some preps, check them out. mypatriotsupply.com. Really good folks. Great food. So we'll get into this a bit. So what I really wanted this podcast to be about, Matt and I were discussing this before getting started here today and sort of throwing together some notes and figuring this out. I wanted this to be more about the cultural change. We are obviously going to talk about some prepping elements, but we've done podcasts before where we discuss like prepping on a budget. We've got that episode if you want to check it out, where we go through a ton of things, related to, getting into prepping on a budget and making sure that you're especially adhering to your budget, because right now money is short, times are tight, and it can be really tough to get a little extra here and there when you're living on a budget. So we have an entire podcast just on prepping on a budget. Also, we've got a podcast where we discuss, things related to the modern homesteader. Now, homesteading and prepping go hand in hand, obviously, but they are sort of philosophically different ideas that we're not going to get into homesteading in this particular podcast. But it's interesting to talk about the people, the culture of prepping, what it has been and what it's changed to, and the people that are embracing, the culture of preparedness. Prepping has this weird negative connotation to it for some reason. Like whenever you hear prepper, you think like, all right, straight up like 1980s conferences. Like some of you may be old enough to remember in the 80s. Now, I wasn't alive during this time, but I was raised by people who lived through this in their heyday and explained and articulated it to me extremely well. But in the 80s, especially like the mid to late 80s, they would have these prepper conferences, and they were super popular. And like all these folks would show up and go to these sort of rendezvous, if you will, these meet and greets, Matt, and they would have, a meeting of the minds about prepping. And word kind of got around that some people within that community were, let's just say, maybe a little different
out there.
And look, that's okay, right? Like, we can't judge, because now here we see that these people, after all this time, they are who they are. And, a lot of these folks nowadays are probably in their 60s or 70s. And, safe to say, most of them, stick to themselves, live their lives the way they want. They're peaceful, they do their thing, and they continue to have that sort of prepper lifestyle. But for a long time, prepping got into this sort of weird environment where, it almost had a little bit of a negative connotation depending on who you ask. But the changing culture of the prepper culture, I almost feel like prepping may not be the correct word. I mean, it is the correct word. That's still what we call it. But a general state of preparedness where, you can pretty much take care of any bad situation that might result, like the need for that, the need for a prepper community that is, let's just say average folks. The changing face of that culture is beginning to be more your soccer moms, you're just average people. And I want to talk about that a little bit.
Yes. And I think, you had a very good point that, maybe the term and the categorization of prepper does need to change, because so much has happened. There's a reason that, homesteading and prepping are kind of synonymous. Even though they're different things, they both convey the same thing, which is self-reliance. And really, I feel like everybody still calls it prepping because of the ease of, everybody understanding what that means.
It's a buzzword.
Yeah, instead of trying to change the terminology and saying, well, how about we just rename it to self-reliant? Because it's much easier just to say prepping. And honestly, I don't have a problem with the term. I think it fits the bill. It's very descriptive. You hear it, you know exactly what it is. Yeah. And what you're starting to see is before the, term prepping was more in line with like nuclear holocaust, bunkers in the ground, and all
societal collapse,
conspiracy
which one could argue
theories.
We're seeing that right now.
Yes, you can. But I think that the last couple of years, especially right now with the way inflation's heading up and a lot of stuff costing a lot more money, people being priced out of, certain goods like meats and poultry and even vegetables, having a shortage of vegetables, grains. You're starting to see a lot more people come into the community that you normally wouldn't. So you would have like your everyday moms starting to garden. So you might say, hey, that's not necessarily a prepping habit, but it does fall in line, because once you harvest those crops, now what do you have to do with it? You might have 13 zucchinis. No one's really eating 13 zucchinis before they go bad. We have to, we have to prep them. We have to pressure can them or preserve them and make sure that we're able to utilize this, the crops that we grow. Even my mom's never gardened. She's never grew anything. All of a sudden she has a green thumb the last couple of years, and she's growing everything. She's very happy. And a lot of it comes from those shortages. We're starting to see a new generation of preppers, younger folks. And I think this stems from the uptick of social media. You're seeing a lot of stuff, like you're seeing a ton of homesteading YouTube channels. You're seeing, and not just with homesteading, but even like the interesting ones like primitive technology. So the videos where you see them kind of making like houses out of like a hand tool in the middle of the jungle. All that stuff is really cool. And that's kind of the entryway to like getting into like what can and can't you do on your own with your own self-reliance.
I hate to bust your bubble on that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you ever saw a video on that. On a side note,
I
they
have.
actually ended up determining that a lot of that is kind of bullcrap. It's like fake.
Yes, except for the original primitive technology guy in Australia. So
I noticed that there was
yes.
one guy that was like going through, and these builds are completely legit, and
Yeah.
he's totally transparent about, hey, this took me a long time. Like, don't think you're going to do this overnight. You know, like maybe some time lapse photography, but
no, there's
it
the
is
one
interesting
channel that's
the
legit.
community of people who have, you know, started to put all this content on YouTube and have put, you know, much more in the forefront of society, you know, the concept of self-preservation, the concept of being prepared for any, you know, situation you might run into, or even just introducing people to these concepts that may not have ever known that it was a thing, right? I think of like the soccer mom who, you know, maybe she's got 3 or 4 kids or something like that, which by today's standards, that would be considered a pretty large family. Let's say you got a few kids and maybe you're lucky enough to be a stay-at-home mom, and maybe that's the role that you're okay with, and maybe your husband makes all the money, or, you know, those roles can be switched. I mean, there's stay-at-home dads, there's families that take care of each other from a community aspect, there's multifamily households. I mean, look, I'm not trying to paint some picture of that everyone should live that way or whatever. It's like, look, everyone has their differences, but for whatever situation, you know, in the past, right? Mom will go to the grocery store, buy, you know, she might have to get enough food to make sure that she can prepare meals for the kids throughout the week. And, you know, that's getting harder and harder, and it's costing more and more money, and it can be very difficult sometimes to budget, you know, even just, you know, taking care of a week's worth of groceries. So getting people in the mindset through this content, as you said, Matt, where people, you know, think, well, you know what, maybe we buy a day's extra every week or something, and then that little day we keep adding a day and adding a day, and look, over a period of time, a person may find, wow, we have an extra month worth of food, an extra 2 months worth of food, an extra 3 months worth of food. Maybe we saw a deal at the grocery store on meat, and we decided, wow, let's, you know, we have the ability to pressure can. We've got our pressure canner. Maybe we've got a freeze dryer if we're lucky enough to be able to afford one, because they're quite expensive. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the ability to preserve your food, all right, now we can take advantage of when, you know, meat's on sale, we can pressure can it, and life goes on. So I think people are taking more of a direct role in how much food they store, how they store it, and that culture is changing, you know, a lot more from just the guy in the woods with a beard, like you think, like back in the 80s, in the old days or whatever, in the 90s, it was a real big thing, to now it's like, you know, your soccer mom, your average, you know, suburbanite, your average person who just simply goes, wow, things are sketchy. Look at, you know, shortages in the grocery store, prices are increasing, inflation's going nuts. I mean, no matter how you cut it, people are seeing the effects of that, and they must react to that. So it's really interesting to see culturally, like, not only has it become essential, right? People have accepted it, but it has now become essential in many cases.
It has. And, you know, along with, you know, the whole, like, you know, homesteading and preparing and prepping channels, there was one channel, and the name escapes me, but it was a grandmother and a grandson, and it was Depression era cooking. And it was literally like a grandmother that lived through the Great Depression, and she was showing her grandson like recipes on how to utilize the entire thing. So they would go out and get, you know, a cut of meat, and she would say, hey, you know, in the Depression era, we didn't have the same, obviously they didn't have the same money, but they would take this, and how would they extend this? How can they get as much out of this meal or out of these groceries to provide for this family? And the families back then were massive. We're talking 6, 8, 10 people deep in a family. So I was watching a few of these videos, and it just amazed me how creative they can get on how to extend out these meals. And then those are the types of channels that pick up steam, and it kind of picks the interest of people that say, hey, you know, I like that. I can start doing that. And then how do I start producing my own produce, my own, you know, whatever it is, lettuce, potatoes. And then that step leads to, well, why don't I start collecting my own rainwater for filtration system and stuff like that? So there's so many different opportunities to go into the prepping community and start getting into, you know, self-reliance and prepping without having to go down this rabbit hole of, conspiracy theorists, nuclear holocaust, kind of like the traditional things that people think about. And even like, you could even say like the van life. I was like a huge thing, like the van life, lifestyle that you see on YouTube, or at least you used to. They were pushing that van life where people go and convert minivans into like houses on wheels, and they're just traveling around, living
in the tiny homes.
Yes,
yeah.
And I mean, okay, so imagine this: you're living in a van. You would have to believe there's some type of self-reliance going on there. I mean, as far as like, you don't have the opportunity to hold that much food. You're in a little van. So you have to try to make as much as you can count.
I think it's a lifestyle too.
It is. And it gets people prepared for that lifestyle, because it is a commitment. And like whatever it is that you do. So like a great example is like if you said, hey, the 2A lifestyle or the firearms lifestyle, you have to dress a certain way to be comfortable. Like you don't get the chance to wear like the really athletic shirts and the skinny jeans. Like you just can't. Like it doesn't work with what you're with the life that you live. Not successfully for me, at least. So like I'm known in my head, okay, I have to dress a certain way in order to feel comfortable. That's a lifestyle decision. It's the same thing with, homesteading or prepping or self-reliance. Like that there's a certain lifestyle that you have to live in order to make it work. And I think as soon as people understand that and they can wrap their head around that, then it's much easier.
Yeah. It's an easier sell to society from a cultural standpoint of, hey, why do people do this? I mean, whereby like back in the day, as you mentioned, and during the Depression, my pops lived through the Great Depression.
Right.
He passed away when he was 94 years old. And he's been gone now almost 12 years, right? So if we add those numbers together, I mean, that's a lot of experience. That's a lot of time since the Great Depression, obviously. But, I'm lucky enough that my grandfather lived through it and was able to, share those stories with me and share, hey, when I was a kid, this is how we had to do things. And so it is interesting to hear, directly from someone who lived through it, that was just the way life was back then, that you had to be very well prepared. You had to think about the future. You had to, put back food when you could and save food and make your every dollar stretch, because during the Great Depression, things were tough.
Well, back then it was every nickel.
Oh, yes.
Every
absolutely.
nickel had to be stretched.
Every penny.
Yeah.
So you talk about stretching a penny during the Great Depression. That was certainly so. But nowadays, it's almost like, it's weird when you look at your society and you look at the way things are happening and the way that, people, these trends, right, they tend to come full circle, right? You look at something like the Great Depression, which happened so long ago, and then now it's like, here it is again. Not to say that we're in a recession or depression now. There are the saber rattlings of that environment happening, which is why people kind of go, okay, maybe we need to do what our great-grandfathers and grandmothers did and sort of think that same way. But now that concept comes full circle in that it's normal because that's what they did to survive. So now we have to kind of go, hey, things could get a little crazier, right? Yes. Our logistics and our supply and our ability to keep up with modern demands for food and amenities, has it gotten better than what it was 100 years ago? Obviously, of course it has, right? We have better refrigeration. We have better ways to preserve things. We have better logistics and supply chains and faster movement of products from point A to point B. So, to say, has life gotten better as a result of technology and logistics? Of course it has. But there's always going to be in the back of someone's mind that thought process of, you know what, maybe we need to be a little bit better prepared. Maybe we need to head this off. Like they see, social media has allowed information to travel so quickly and for ideas to travel quickly. And sometimes those ideas are packed full of really helpful, useful things that we can go, wow, that's great. Like we zone in on the people that go, wow, these people have wonderful ideas, and social media is a great tool for us to be able to instantly share and react to those ideas in real time. But the problem sometimes can be that sometimes having too much information is a bad thing too, because then people kind of start to manufacture crises that maybe aren't real, And then some crisis that might develop in their mind that maybe is something they need to kind of pay attention to. So I feel like this modern prepper, the cultural, significance of the modern prepper and what that means for our society, is some of it a little bit, knee-jerk reaction, and maybe they're being a little bit too overly worried about a certain area of the economy. Maybe so. However, some of it is well-researched, well-founded, and completely understandable as to their concerns.
Knee-jerk reaction would be an understatement because it went from one extreme to the other. And I do think that, if anything, the pandemic taught us was, everybody needs to be prepared. Because I think that over the course of 2 years, people got to see people that normally wouldn't have an opportunity to experience what it was like to have food shortages, got a heavy crash course in it, because that is probably the only time in modern history that you would walk into a grocery store and there would be no beef or no meat or poultry in the supermarket, or you go in and there's actually bare shelves. I can't remember any other time that I've ever seen in 30 years that's ever happened. So I think that was a wake-up call for a lot of people, for most people, in fact. And what you're seeing now is 2 years worth of research, 2 years worth of experience, prepping, growing, canning, where now it wasn't socially acceptable to be able to have a conversation. You wouldn't see, Becky talking with her friend about, I just pressure canned these pears that, I picked from my pear tree. That wasn't something that people talked about. But now you see it all over the place. People are like, this is a good, recipe for this. I pressure can that. And I love it because more people, should be getting into it.
Yeah. It's becoming more culturally acceptable in society for people to go, hey, here's my pressure canning recipe.
Yeah.
Or, hey, here's a great deal I found at the local shop on this. Maybe you should go get some yourself. So it's like that sharing of resources, is super important. So I know we've touched a lot on like the cultural, aspects of like what the modern prepper is and what it means to our society. And I think it's great that we're seeing almost a renaissance of people getting back to kind of some of the old ways. And I know Chad and I have discussed that in several, other videos, like where we've talked about things like Selfreliance. We did the ham radio episode. We've got our manly meals episodes. And of course, I'm doing some name drops here because I'm trying to share some of the content with you that we've made in the past. But we've got, pressure can and deer and all kind of other, basic essential skills that we've done videos on, and more things we're going to do videos on in the future to try and kind of share that wisdom. And people getting back to sort of the old ways. And hey, old school is new school in a lot of ways. Like old school, you always go back to the tried and true sort of mechanisms of those lifestyles that made them survive and work. I mean, like what they say, survival is taught by tactics are taught by the survivors.
Yeah.
Right. Gaydon said that.
History is taught by the winners.
That's correct. So the thing is, it's like, that is true, and whereby we always associate that with combat arms or combat-related things or martial arts. While those are important, of course, I feel like just a simple day-to-day in and out type of idea of just basic life, survival. People tend to put that by the wayside. Like our culture, we don't have to be hunter-gatherers anymore. We don't have to go out with a loincloth on and go chase deer down and kill them with a spear and then the whole village like cut it apart. And like we don't spend our entire day-to-day operations trying to survive anymore. Yep. And it's made a group of people who are soft, who are not capable of doing anything or getting their hands dirty or getting any dirt under their fingernails or blood and guts on their hands or getting a little nasty smell on them from time to time. Like we've gotten so complacent because we haven't had to survive that now we sit around and we manufacture these random ideas in our head that we come up with strife. We come up with adversities and we come up with these fake reasons to be upset. Right. That aren't even related to, I mean, gosh, could you imagine having to hunt and survive and think that if you didn't have the right amount of smoked meat stored or vegetables or plant your crops, if you had a bad crop that year, some of your people could die. Like, you could die. It's just random to think that our society doesn't understand how fragile and delicate survival is, and that there are many, many mechanisms within our everyday world that if one little tiny thing got a little out of line, one of those wheels is slightly out of balance, all right, all of a sudden, I mean, look at the gas situation, fuel prices, transportation costs, inflation. I mean, there's all these things. I'm not trying to be, the tinfoil hat guy or scare anybody, but the truth of the matter is that the logistics that dictate our world are fragile, and people, I believe, at a holistic level in our society, primarily American society, haven't fully, been slapped in the face one good time and fully appreciate just how delicate the balance of logistics is in this country.
Yeah, it's like that cartoon where you see like the guy walking and just like slap another guy in the face with a big fish. You're right. They haven't had to feel that impact yet. And when they do, it's going to be a rude awakening on, survival. And I'm glad you mentioned when you said, they don't have enough smoked meat and like hunter gatherers. The world is getting so soft, and Americans are getting so soft that they want meat, but they're so put off by having to go and kill and get their own meat. They're trying to figure out a way to manufacture it. So imagine that, Eric. You're like, I like meat. I like the way it tastes, but I don't actually want to go through the trouble of getting it. It's too dirty. It's too bloody.
Proteins,
or just growing it in a lab. Like, this is actual meat, but we're growing it. Like, nah, it's not going to taste the same.
I do find it strange that, like if there's some dietary reason that someone has to have, let's say, a plant-based burger, for instance. All right. I've tried a plant-based burger. Look, I'm the kind of person, I'm not going to knock something until I've tried it in terms of food like that. Hey, I tried it. I didn't like it. I thought it tasted terrible. But what would be the overall reason that someone would want something like that over fresh venison that they harvested themselves? The deer ain't got a whole bunch of GMOs and bull crap. Like, it is natural venison right out of planet Earth. There it is. No bull crap. It really gets to me how, okay, maybe someone's allergic, they can't have real meat, or there's some dietary reason that someone has to have it, but it's like people are saying, oh, we're going to have cricket burgers and all this mess. And now I've even seen some stuff come out where, I saw in the news lately, I don't have the article pulled up right here, I'd have to pull it up, but there were some large companies starting to sneak cricket protein into something that's not cricket protein, like not advertised as having that in it. And some people are having some weird reactions to eating crickets.
Well,
dietary wise.
That's kind of gross, man.
Like when you can hunt, and like here in Georgia, during an average hunting season, we just did an entire episode on getting prepared for hunting. If you want to check that out, if maybe some of you are getting into hunting this year, consider checking that out. But we did an entire episode on it. You mean to tell me that you can kill, 10 or 12 deer a year? That's a lot of meat, right?
It is, man. If I do four or five will get me through the year. Like supplementing it, using it like, sparingly, like, hey, instead of beef, I'll use ground venison and chilies and stuff like that, spaghetti, the loins and stuff like that. I've had a black bean burger and I liked it, but I knew what I got it because I just felt like something other than meat. I don't think that it's fooling anybody. And I don't think any of like the Beyond stuff is like fooling anybody. Like, it's not. I don't think that's their intention either.
Yeah, I think they're pretty open about like, hey, this ain't a burger.
Yeah, and it's just like this weird taste, like this weird flavor. But again, I eat meat. I prefer it. So if you don't consider this, I would also think that we're almost at 9% inflation. It's like 8.3% inflation.
And honestly, the real number is probably even higher than that.
It's probably higher than that. It's safe to say we're only going to have some more issues. If you guys aren't already doing research on how to preserve food I know Chad has some great jam recipes because he gives me like 20. My daughter loves his pear jelly and pear jam. Every morning she's like, I want that, I want it. And I mean, go watch some Manly Meal episodes because they do a great job on that. But get into it, start doing some research, at least, so you'll have it in the back of your mind. Maybe even if you're not doing it regularly, you can still be familiar with it. I would probably also look into, if you guys have the opportunity, look into making pemmican. If you guys don't know what pemmican is, it's an absolutely disgusting survival food that lasts for a very long time. It was originally made back during like the 18th century. So think Revolutionary War, colonial times, and basically pemmican is the original MRE survival food. You would pack it, you would make it. It's made of like meat and dates and oats and all kinds of stuff kind of mashed together into a survival bar. And that is what they would eat. They would, as they're going through the wilderness exploring, they would reach in their little bag and they would eat some pemmican. Absolutely disgusting. I've had it before because people still make it. They're like they make modern renditions of it. And what you can actually do is you can eat it straight, or you can like boil it and make a broth out of it. So you can just break off a cube. It's almost like a beef bouillon cube. It's fairly simple to make. It doesn't require a lot of, different equipment, but it keeps for a very long time.
I want to mention, in this particular podcast as well, that on the Manly Meals front, I want to provide maybe a little bit of an update on what's going on with the Manly Meals episodes. Some of y'all have been asking when we're going to cut more Manly Meals episodes. We're actually still working on the kitchen. We're setting up an auxiliary kitchen that we can use just for a set, if you will. So we have more room to maneuver cameras and much better lighting. I was looking back through our Manly Meals episodes and I really wasn't happy with the product, although the information is good. Quite frankly, we want better production quality, so I want to put together the best piece of content I can. So, of course, we've got a very well-lit room, and everything's coming together. We are going to be putting granite countertops and everything in there, so we're still working on it, but it's coming together great. And we will cut Manly Meals episodes on all of this stuff. We're going to make our own homemade pemmican. We're going to make hardtack. We're going to do some meal in a jar recipes. We're going to do some steak and maybe a little bougie cooking too for fun, some fancy cooking. But we'll go from everything from basic to complex, and we'll do some cast iron skillet cooking. Also, just a quick note, I've also got an awesome cast iron waffle maker that I picked up at an antique store. We're going to go through and we're going to re-season that thing and restore it. It does need a little bit of work, but I promise those videos are on the way, and if you follow us here on the YouTube channel on Iraq Veteran 8888, you will see more Manly Meals episodes, and I apologize for the delay in Manly Meals deliveries in terms of the videos. We are working on it, and I promise we do intend to get back to it. And quick note, I want to mention just some housekeeping for the channel, and I think it relates to this content, so I just want to include this in there. We're also going to be getting a Harvest Right freeze dryer.
Nice.
They make some different sizes. So expect an entire batch of videos, if not an ongoing series, related to the Harvest Right freeze dryer and the art of freeze drying. And that is one of the best ways for long-term food storage. Now, obviously, we mentioned My Patriot Supply, and they sell freeze-dried foods that keep for a very long time. Properly freeze-dried food will keep 2 decades or more if properly stored. So that is a great option if you want to have a ready-made option. That is, all you have to do is just buy it and simply store it. That's great. And remember, you do get the discount if you go to the LLP, mypatriotsupply.com/LLP. And if you buy through there, you do get a 20% discount. So that might be a great way you can dip your toe in trying freeze-dried food. Maybe you don't know if you like the texture or the flavor or the freshness, but I will say you will enjoy it. It's awesome. And one of the things about freeze-drying that I love so much is that the food does not lose any nutritional value. Okay? and it keeps and stays very fresh. And that's an important thing. I like dehydrating, but the problem with dehydrating is you do lose, texture, flavor, and in some cases, it may not keep as long, and you do lose some nutritional content as well. So expect a full series of videos on freeze drying, and we'll be using the Harvest Right for that. I'm getting the XL unit. I'm going to go full ham and get the oilless pump.
Oh,
But
man.
yeah, we're going completely down the rabbit hole on
Can
that.
you freeze dry whiskey?
I don't know.
Maybe we should try.
There's some things. I'm going to start out with freeze drying. I think I'm going to do like ice cream sandwiches and Skittles to start out, because I think most people, because it's so easy, you just put Skittles on a tray and there you go. We'll probably start out with some more of the, let's just say that's a novelty item. Although, have you ever had a freeze-dried ice cream sandwich?
I had the space one, which I think is very similar. Yeah, the space food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so wild.
It
Like
does.
the texture, it's so weird.
It's like dry but creamy at the same time. It's like it is wild.
It's
for sure.
weird, but at the same time, it's familiar. Like you eat it, and it's like, dude, that's totally an ice cream sandwich. Like it is analog of ice cream. Like it. It doesn't have the same satisfaction of a fresh ice cream sandwich, but
it's super light too. It's almost like a piece of paper.
Yeah, it is. So we will get into that. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that, but just for some housekeeping, I wanted to make sure you know that if you do follow the Manly Meals episodes, that we are doing more, and I promise that we'll get those in the queue, and it will be worth the wait. I promise.
So if we're looking at just self-reliance, I know we've been talking about food and preparing and stuff like that, but we are a gun channel after all.
Sure.
So what is there and I'm asking you because you probably know better than I do, a specific way to, I guess, preserve your ammo? Like if you're because I've seen people like vacuum seal it. I've seen people kind of store it in ammo cans with oxygen absorbers. But long term, what would you think?
Well, it's great that you brought that up, because I know earlier we were talking. This video is this podcast and video is kind of primarily from more of the cultural aspect of how the culture of prepping is changing. And I did hint earlier that we would talk about guns, so I think that's a great way to segue. And the face of firearms owners is changing as well, and very much in that same cultural aspect. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about it, but it's just important to recognize that while the soccer moms are also, prepping a little bit more and taking that aspect of their lives much more seriously, as such, you're seeing a lot more soccer moms and people from many different backgrounds, many different political affiliations saying, you know what, we want to have a gun and protect ourselves. Whereby 5-6 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, soccer mom might have said, no way is an AR going to be in my house, not in a million years. Now they're like, oh, when are we going to buy an AR? Because they see all the crazy things going on and they want to be able to protect themselves. So we've done videos before where we've talked about like essential guns that we think people should have and the types of guns that are the most useful. We have a whole bunch of videos over on the Iraq Veteran 8888 channel that go into every single thing you could ever want to know for the new gun owner. Everything from safety, ammunition considerations, guns, action types, you name it, shotgun shell identification. I mean, if you can think of it, we probably have it. So I will try and include a list down in the comment section below to those videos. So look for those. I'll put that in there for those of you that want to do some deeper research, and I would recommend that you do deeper research. But to answer Matt's question about ammo storage, that's a very good question, because, right, think about it. We've got food stored. We've tried to, let's just say, be well prepared in our food storage. And what do we have as the pillars of our everyday life, right? We have to have shelter, right? We have to have food. We have to have security. I mean, those are very, very important pillars of our everyday existence. So as a result, I mean, you can't feed your guns without ammo. So how do you store your ammo? That's a great question. I mean, how much ammo is too much ammo? Well, there's never enough ammo, right? You can never have too much ammo. So how do you store it? Well, that's a great concept. I mean, vacuum sealing is great, especially for rimfire ammo. You can take your oxygen depleters and do your vacuum seal bags, and that's a great way to make sure that your ammo doesn't get impregnated by any kind of moisture or anything. So keeping your ammo dry and in a cool environment is probably important. And vacuum sealing your rimfire ammo into like 100 or maybe 200 round bundles, and then you just break open what you need when you need it, and then put those bags down inside like an ammo can with an oxygen depleter. That's a great way to do it. Obviously, good old school military ammo cans with a good seal. Make sure you got a proper seal that's not all rotted out. Ammo cans, can really be in a lot of different varying conditions, and sometimes those seals are dry rotted, not in very good condition. Yep. So if you're going to a surplus store and they've got a giant pallet with 250 ammo cans on it, go through and be picky and look for one that's in good shape. Buy a couple of ammo cans, and you can store all different sorts of things in ammo cans, everything from batteries, food items if you wish, obviously ammunition, and so that's an obvious option there, is to use good ammo cans, vacuum seal bags. You can even leave the ammunition in its factory boxes and then just stack those boxes inside an ammo can. I know Chad and I, one time we got into a huge lot of rimfire ammo that we bought from the civilian marksmanship program. Went over to Anniston, and they had this white box Mylar wrapped 22 ammo, which is perfect because it's already sealed in Mylar. Yeah.
I remember you mentioning that to us about you getting a sick deal on it.
Yeah, we bought I don't know, 75,000 rounds or something like that. It was pennies on the dollar. It was so cheap we couldn't turn it down. And it's just like 40 grain lead nose match ammo that they used in the Kimber 84s and the other training rifles that the military was using for training purposes. And we stacked it all in ammo cans, nice and neat, shoved it in there. So that's fine. You can leave it in its factory packaging if you want. Just make sure that it doesn't attract any moisture. Maybe put an oxygen depleter in there. Maybe a light coat of oil on the seal, and then seal it up, helps. Label it, put it on the shelf.
Well, the oil also keeps it from dry rotting and sticking too, because I can't tell you how many times, and it's bad, but you go into the arms room, or you go into the storage unit that they're keeping all the stuff in, and you pop that top and it's stuck, and then it sticks, and then you open it and it rips the gasket open. Yeah. So there's a good chance that a lot of those ammo boxes that happen. So make sure that little black rubber seal is on there.
Yeah, you could use a little grease if you want. Just kind of grease them from time to time, and as long as you keep them from dry rotting, and or anything like that, they're going to seal quite well. And you'd be surprised, they'll seal good with an oxygen depleter, with a little coat of oil around the top.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in a pinch, you could even just use some old used motor oil. I mean, there's plenty of options there. So, ammo storage is important, and the face of gun ownership is changing, and I think it's for the better. I mean, there's way more minorities buying guns now than there used to be. All your soccer moms and average people from many different walks of life and many different racial backgrounds, religious backgrounds, political backgrounds. Firearms ownership is becoming so much more of just a area of mutual commonality between people, that the Second Amendment is much more off limits to a wider variety of people than it ever has been. Mm-hmm. And that phenomenon has really come full circle in the last decade or so.
Well, you're starting to see a huge, I know here in Georgia, we have constitutional carry, and that helped out quite a bit because there was so much misinformation involved with what you need in order to apply for a Georgia firearms license. In Georgia, we're unique in that we don't have separate licenses for concealed carry and gun ownership. It's just everything is one. So what that firearms license allows you to do is basically either concealed carry, open carry, or cross state lines to a city or a state that has reciprocity. And there was so much misinformation revolving around that it kept firearms out of a lot of people's hands because they didn't want to go through the quote trouble of applying for it. Well, now with constitutional carry, you see, I mean, I run into people all the time that for all intents and purposes I wouldn't think are people that would carry firearms, and lo and behold, they'll see me, they'll strike up a conversation. Obviously there might be some notoriety. They might know who I am, or they might recognize me, and they always ask questions about firearms. And I'm like, well, that's great. And these are not people that I would think carry firearms, but they do. So that's awesome that it's starting to grow. And like you said, it is the soccer moms, and it is the people that typically aren't in that genre. The nuclear holocaust genre with the big burly beards and the flannel jackets and the,
Look, and I ain't hating
the
on
trapper hats.
Listen, I ain't hating on those people because I was raised by those kind of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I grew up around those kind of people. So those are my people. I'm not trying to paint this in a perspective of, oh, well, we should just openly embrace the fact that prepping is mainstream now. I guess you could really say that. It's more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
So
which
instead
is a
of
good
just
thing.
being guys in the woods with beards and jugs of moonshine, which are the people I was raised by.
Yep.
I mean, my ancestors were moonshiners.
Well,
okay, we originally settled in Louisville, Kentucky. So my ancestors come from Kentucky, and we've been here a long dang time. And yeah, my ancestors moonshiners and ran afoul with the law, probably more than I care to admit, probably more than I want to know. But the point is, though, is that, yeah, we've come a long way. Like, I'm not saying those burly dudes with beards in the mountains with moonshine and too many guns are bad people. They are my people. That's the song of my people, believe me. But it is interesting to see it come full circle. And you would never have thought that you would see soccer moms on YouTube making videos about, and they're wearing their spandex pants and their sports bra and doing videos about, well, I went to the store and found some extra rice, and look, you can store it in here. And and the whole time there's this older guy with the long beard kind of going, kind of chuckling and going, well, hey, you got to start somewhere. So,
exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's the new generation. That's the next generation. Like, the original OG old preppers might be saying, well, this is how you grow the rice yourself, and then you harvest it and then use it. The modern prepper is going to go to the store and just buy it, but they're going to hold on to it in Mylar bags, and it's going to keep for 20 years, and you're going to be absolutely fine.
And it's also fun to learn as you go, because then you learn about, oh, I couldn't store it this way, it spoiled, or I did this or did that. So that's what's so cool about, the amount of information that's out there now is people share that knowledge that they've learned the hard way, like what we call bought lessons, right? A bought lesson is, well, I bought a big batch of rice and I vacuum sealed it, or I did this, or I put it in containers, and what the heck, there's these bugs in it or something. So, and then they learn, oh, this is what we did wrong. Like with flour, I learned that lesson. I was thinking, well, I'll store a bunch of flour, everything's cool. And I vacuum sealed it, opened some up, and I'm like, what the heck are these bugs in here? What the freaking hell? Look in there. And turns out you freeze it first, and it kills the eggs. I didn't know that. So see, like, you learn those little hacks and you share them with people, and it helps us all collectively become less wasteful.
Yep. Very similar to cigars. If you guys get a big batch of cigars, put them in the freezer overnight, and it kills the beetles that live in the cigars. Yeah, because that will.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. Tobacco beetles. True? Yeah, it's true. So yeah.
My cigars don't sit around long enough for that to happen.
This is if
I smoke them. They're in there. They're burning up.
Yep. If you season your cigars in the humidor and you keep them for a while, you like to let them age. You need to freeze them overnight, let them, and then put them in the humidor.
You're saying that aging cigars is a thing?
Yeah.
People do that?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah. They'll stay as long as you keep your humidity up and you keep keep everything good. You get rid of those tobacco beetles in the freezer.
So in a disaster world, okay, we talk about the modern prepper. Okay, we already talked about guns, we talked about food, and I guess now we're going. The ATF is a convenience store, so now we're talking. We've already mentioned alcohol a little bit, but now we're talking about cigars. I mean, you can't be in a post-disaster environment and be cigarless.
Environment.
You got to have a cigar.
That's right.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, as long as you keep that humidity up, you just keep dropping a little bit of your sacred, water in there. Just a couple of drops to keep it up. You're good.
Yeah.
Some things will last forever.
I always thought that, like, a cigar, needs to be fresh, and you smoke them while they're fresh and kind of spongy, and like if they get kind of, brittle, that's when they're not so good. They burn hot, and then they don't taste as good.
And that's if you don't keep your humidity up in your humidor. You'll typically see that. But as long as your humidity is like anywhere between, I would say, 45, 50, 60%.
Now we just got to get, soccer mom smoking cigars with us.
You'd be surprised. Some of them do.
Oh, man. We can kind of end this a little bit, too, by talking about, alcohol as a prep. Now, we've talked about this in a few previous videos and podcasts that we've done over the years, but obviously that's another great area that if you go to your local bottle shop and they have some vodka on sale for a decent price, and especially if you can get it in bulk and they'll give you a break, or maybe they've got a bunch of stuff in that's it's hard for them to move and they need to get rid of it, by all means, storing vodka and keeping a lot on hand. Vodka is certainly a miracle alcohol that's good to have. It can be used as a mouthwash, antiseptic. It helps with body odor. I mean, you can cook with it. There's so many things that vodka is used for, just from a preparatory standpoint. It's a nice thing to have laying around.
The neutral flavor of the vodka. I mean, obviously, we all know vodka has a distinctive taste, but it's still neutral in contrast to what a lot of other alcohols have. They don't really, because they're distilling it so many times. It's not accepting the characteristics of the barrel or anything like that. It's not aged. It lends itself to being used for a lot of other stuff.
I think more people are actually buying alcohol as an investment than they did in the past too. I mean, all you have to now. This is a different wheelhouse, but I think it kind of harkens to the modern prepper as well, because you might have some person who in years past would have never thought about keeping extra food laying around. Maybe they would have never thought about keeping, firearms and extra ammo and trying to be prepared in their own security. But you've also got these people that are businessmen and they might invest money in alcohol. So that's a thing, right? In years past, you probably had some guys that would maybe buy limited edition bottles, or maybe get a certain type of alcohol that came out that maybe is real popular, and then they'll kind of speculate on it and resell it and stuff like that. I wouldn't call them scalpers, but some people would call them scalpers.
Most definitely. They're flippers.
They're flippers, but you are seeing that some people will sort of talk up a certain bottle. I hate to say this because it's going to make the price maybe
Don't say it.
But Eagle Rare, okay? I mean, look Eagle Rare bourbon. There was a time, you could walk into any bottle shop and pick it up for $20. Mm-hmm. It was just a great bourbon, a decent statement that you could get for, a reasonable price. And then word gets out, and we tend to, as a society, it's we want what other people want. We want what people say is good, and it's after a while the price becomes unimportant. It's just simply that, hey, this is great and we don't care what it costs. And what does that do? That makes the price of this stuff go up like crazy. So now Eagle Rare, sometimes on the secondhand or scalper market, when you've just really got to have it. I mean, I've seen Eagle Rare sell for between $60 and $90 a bottle.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm not saying people are wrong to resell it for that price and make a profit. I'm just saying that is another form of this modern prepper movement, where you might have a guy with 30 or 40 bottles of Eagle Rare.
I mean,
on hand. I mean,
I
may or may not be one of those people.
It does make a very good bartering tool. There are things that just always work, and I would say coffee makes a very good bartering tool, because it's not something that you can grow yourself. It takes a very specific set of, environmental, contingencies to grow. And we just don't have it here in the U.S. So coffee makes a good bartering tool. Alcohol always makes a good bartering tool. It doesn't matter what it is. Cigarettes, tobacco.
I'm not a smoker. So for me, I'm indifferent. And someone wants to, I've got to have a pack of cigarettes. You can trade. I mean, we're getting more into the post-apocalyptic scenario. Mm-hmm. However, you never know. I mean, I got to a point where I keep baby food.
Yeah, you just never know.
And I rotate it out. I keep baby food. I mean, you never know. You might come across a child that needs food, and it's good to be able to provide that, if someone in your community is in need of that.
Or you might break your jaw, and you need to eat something, and you just
you can drink your keys through a straw. in case you have a
Exactly.
broken jaw.
But I would say grain alcohol is really good too. Like, I mean, you see
That's
people.
gin.
No, that's like the super high proof, like golden, like goes it golden grain stuff like that. Like you run your car off of it, man. It'll strip paint off walls.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the kind of stuff. It's like they use it for antiseptics. They use it to clean, cuts, wounds, sterilize stuff. Like it doesn't taste very good. It will absolutely get you blitzed. Like if you drink it. I mean, that's where you start seeing all the kids get alcohol poisoning because they're pouring it into like punches and they're not realizing how powerful this stuff is. It's like 200 proof alcohol.
Well, and I suppose if things in the survival world are not going so well, you can always just drink your sorrows away. That's always one way to do it.
Yeah, it will definitely not take much. But it's good. You can make all kinds of stuff with it. But yeah, I would probably second that. I would say, having a little bit of a liquor reserve would be a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think people are just approaching life and prepping in general state of self-sufficiency from a standpoint of moderation. Yeah, they're not going to have a year's worth of food saved up, but I think more and more people are trying to get a month or two saved up, or maybe three months. I mean, I think if you got 3 months worth of food saved up, you're way ahead of the curve of kind of heading off any potential food shortages or inflation. I mean, think about it. Like when there is a shortage, how long does it usually last? I mean, think about the toilet paper shortage.
Yeah, that's true.
How long did that last? Realistically.
Well, and it's not
2 months.
Yeah, it's not. It wasn't. It was worse because people overplayed it.
Right. But I mean, we're talking at most maybe for 90 days. It was like the toilet paper situation. People were killing each other with toilet paper.
Well, here's the good thing. People that are worried about the expense of having to have a 3-month food reserve, you can go to mypatriotsupply.com/LLP and get 3 months for $780.
Whew.
There you go.
I mean,
that's three.
That is a solution.
That's
that
3
is a
meals a
turnkey
day.
solution.
That's 3 meals a day for a family. There you go. Boom.
All right. Well, I think that concludes today's podcast on that note.
You have to say that was a pretty good integration.
Yeah, great integration there, Matt. Great job. But look, on a serious note, I think we covered things quite well, and I really just wanted to acknowledge the newcomers to the prepping movement and the self-sufficiency movement. And maybe in today's podcast, we sort of answered some of your questions. Maybe we, verified some of your concerns, or some, gave you some improve and some sustains to go on. Maybe we gave you some food for thought that you maybe had not thought of before. So hopefully today's podcast was worth your time and you came away better for it. That's all we can really hope for. And I really, really appreciate all of you who give us a great rating here on all of the different podcast forums, and that follow us on the audio forum as well as a video forum here on YouTube on Iraq Veteran 8888. We do release this in video form over on YouTube if you want to see our ugly mugs as well as listen to us.
Speak for yourself.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Go over to Ballistic Ink and pick yourself up a snazzy new t-shirt. That's one way you can support our podcast directly. Thank you guys so much. Have a great week, and we're trying our best to keep these rolling for you every single week. Bear with us. Sometimes we have a lapse in coverage, but I promise we're always going to have more coming. So have a good one. Many more on the way. We'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Life, Liberty, and Pursuit. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. You can support us over on Ballistic Ink by picking yourself up some merch. And remember, guys, danger is freedom. Have a good one.